Welcome, night owls. You're tuned in to Midnight FM. Tonight, we welcome back Grandpa Joseph, who brings us another memory from the deep woods and quiet fields of old America. A tale whispered from one harvest to the next. He calls this one The Whispering Orchard.
It was the autumn of 1959. The kind of cold that seeps into your jacket and stays with you even after the sun rises. I was 17 that year, living with my uncle, Henry Whitlock. He owned an apple orchard on the edge of a small Vermont town called Bradford Hollow. Back then, life was simple. Mornings started with frost, and evenings smelled like wood smoke and cider. But that orchard, it wasn't like the others. At the far edge of our land, beyond the fence line, there was a grove the workers never touched. They called it the Whispering Side. Every year during harvest, we'd fill basket after basket until the barn was full. But no one ever picked from that far corner. Not once. I'd heard the stories growing up. How the trees there were older than the town. How the wind sounded different when it passed through their branches. Some said you could hear voices after dark, whispering your name from the shadows. My uncle never spoke much about it. He'd just say, "Leave that side alone, Joseph. The land's got its own memory." And I, being 17 and too proud for my own good, thought it was all superstition. One afternoon, near the end of harvest, a few workers quit without a word. Said they'd heard something out there the night before. Uncle Henry didn't stop them. He just gave them their pay and let them go. That night over supper, I told him I'd finish the picking myself. He looked up from his plate, quiet for a long moment, then said, "Boy, you don't take what don't belong to you. Those trees keep their own count." I laughed, thought he was teasing me, but he didn't laugh back. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The moon was bright enough to turn the fields silver. So I took a lantern and a basket, and I headed out. The orchard was silent, not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that presses in on your chest. No crickets, no wind, just the soft creak of the trees. When I reached the far grove, the air changed. It was colder, still. The smell of apples was thick, too thick, almost sour. I climbed over the fence and walked between the rows. The apples there looked perfect. Smooth, red, shining like glass in the lantern light. I plucked one from a low branch, tossed it into the basket. Another, then another. And that's when I heard it. A sound. Faint, almost gentle. At first I thought it was wind, but the air wasn't moving. Then I realized it was whispering. Low, hushed voices drifting through the branches all around me. I couldn't make out words, but I could feel the sound, close to my ear, then far away, like it was circling me. I turned the lantern toward the trees. The light flickered and the branches swayed, though the air was still. The whispering stopped, and then, clear as breath, a voice said, "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The basket slipped from my hand, apples rolling into the dirt. I spun around, holding up the lantern, but no one was there. Only the trees, still, watching. Then I saw something. One of the trunks. It wasn't smooth. The bark bulged outward, uneven. I stepped closer, squinting, and my blood ran cold. There, beneath the surface of the bark, was a face. Human. Eyes closed, mouth half open, pressed into the wood like it was trapped there. The lantern trembled in my hand. The longer I stared, the more faces I saw. Dozens. Men, women, maybe even children, all half swallowed by the trees, frozen in pain or fear. And then the whispering came again, only louder now. It wasn't from around me, it was from inside the trees. Dozens of voices murmuring at once, twisting over each other, repeating words I couldn't understand. Until they could. The debt must be paid. The branches moved, slow, groaning like old wood in a storm. I stepped back, but the roots shifted under my feet. Soft earth rising like something underneath was pushing up. I ran, didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached the fence and vaulted over it. When I finally turned, the grove was still again, quiet as stone. But just before I looked away, I swear I saw movement. One of the trees had turned slightly, like it was watching me go. When I made it back to the farmhouse, Uncle Henry was sitting on the porch, lantern beside him, pipe glowing faint in the dark. He didn't ask where I'd been, didn't need to. He just said, "You heard 'em, didn't you?" I couldn't answer. He nodded once, slow. "They ain't angry, boy. They're just hungry, same as they've always been." Then he turned back toward the orchard, and for a moment I thought I heard it again, faintly, carried on the night wind, the sound of whispering. When dawn broke, I hadn't slept a wink. The whispering still clung to my ears like it had followed me home. Uncle Henry didn't speak over breakfast, just stirred his coffee and stared out the window toward the orchard. Finally, he said, "Don't go out there today." I asked him why, but he only said, "The land needs a day to breathe." I thought it was just his way of saying he believed in all those stories, but part of me didn't argue, not after what I'd seen. Around noon, the wind shifted. I remember that clearly. It came rolling down from the hills, colder than it should have been for September. The sky dimmed like a cloud had covered the sun, but when I looked up, the sky was clear. Then I heard something from the direction of the orchard, not whispering this time, cracking. I stepped outside and saw Uncle Henry already walking fast toward the fence. He didn't look back, didn't call for me to follow, but I did anyway. When we reached the edge of the western grove, he stopped dead. Half the trees were split open. It wasn't like lightning had hit them. It looked like something had burst from inside. Bark peeled apart, roots pulled upward. The ground was littered with fallen apples and pieces of bark shaped like ribs. I caught my breath. Something about it looked wrong, not natural, like the trees had twisted themselves apart. Uncle Henry didn't move. He just stood there, pale, eyes wide. Finally, he said, "It's starting early this year." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned to me and said, "Go to the barn, boy. Bring me the old spade." When I came back, he was kneeling near one of the trees, brushing away soil from the base. His hands were trembling. I saw something sticking out of the dirt, pale, like stone. But when he cleared more of it, I realized it wasn't stone. It was bone, a human hand.
I dropped the spade. Uncle Henry didn't even flinch. He kept digging, muttering to himself. They said it would hold. They said it would keep quiet if we gave them enough. He looked up at me then, his eyes hollow. "You had to go there, didn't you?" I couldn't speak. He stood up, wiped his hands on his shirt and said, "Come on, you've seen it now. Might as well know the rest." We walked deeper into the grove. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. Every few steps, I thought I heard movement beneath the ground, faint shifting like something buried and restless. Uncle Henry stopped at the center of the grove, where the trees grew closest together. He pointed at the largest one, its trunk thick and dark, twisted like muscle. He said, "This one is the heart." He knelt again and pressed his palm to the soil. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Your grandfather started this orchard. Said he bought the land cheap because nothing would grow here. But it wasn't empty. There were graves, old ones, before the church was ever built." He looked at me, face pale, voice low. He didn't believe the stories either. Cut down the headstones, plowed the ground, planted trees over it. Said the roots would feed on what was left in the earth. And for a time they did. Apples grew bigger, sweeter than anywhere else. I wanted to say something, but my mouth was dry. Uncle Henry went on. Then the whispering started. Said it was the wind, but it wasn't. The trees began to rot from the inside, and then the faces came. He pointed toward the trunks, where the faint outlines of human features still bulged under the bark. We learned the hard way. You can't take from what's been fed by the dead without giving something back. The wind moved through the grove then, low and steady, and I swear I heard voices in it, whispering, faint and hungry. The trees creaked as if breathing. Uncle Henry turned to leave. He said, "We don't go near this place anymore. We leave it what it wants, and in return, it leaves us alone." But as he said it, one of the trees groaned. The trunk cracked open just enough for me to see something red inside. Not bark, not rot, something wet. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't think of anything but that sound, the groaning of the trees and the sight of those bones under the soil.
I went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tree splitting, the face in the bark, the flicker of red underneath. Sometime after midnight, I heard something tapping against my window. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I sat up, heart hammering. The sound came again. I pulled back the curtain, expecting to see a branch swaying in the wind, but the air was still. No branches near the glass. Then I looked down. Outside, at the edge of the orchard, there was light. Lantern light. It swung slowly between the trees. At first, I thought it was Uncle Henry checking the grove, but the figure holding it was too tall, too thin. The lantern's glow moved closer to the fence, and as it did, I saw that the figure wasn't walking. It was gliding. No sound of footsteps, no shadow cast behind it. It stopped at the fence line, raised its head, and though it was too dark to see its face clearly, I knew what it was. The face from the tree, the same pale, hollow eyes. It looked right at me, and then the lantern went out. I didn't sleep that night. After the lantern vanished, I just sat there, staring out the window, waiting for the dawn to come. But the sky never lightened the way it should have. It stayed gray, dull, like the sun itself didn't want to rise over that orchard. When morning finally came, Uncle Henry was already outside. He was standing near the fence, hat off, hands clenched tight around his pipe. The ground beneath him was torn up, as if something had been dragged across it during the night. He didn't turn when he heard me walk up, just said, "I saw it too." We didn't speak much that morning. He told me to go fetch nails, said he wanted to patch the fence, though I knew damn well no fence could hold back what lived in those trees. As I walked back from the shed, I caught something caught in the wire. A torn piece of cloth, gray and rotten, stiff like it had been buried for years. The smell hit me before I even touched it. Earth and decay, thick and sour. When I turned it over, I saw what it was. A sleeve, and inside it, the remains of a hand. I dropped it. The thing crumbled, dry and blackened.
That night, the wind came again. This time, it carried more than whispers. It carried words. Come back. I heard it from my window, soft at first, then louder, growing into a chorus that filled the entire house. Uncle Henry's dog started barking, then whimpering, then silence. I ran downstairs and found the front door open, swinging in the wind. The lantern by the porch was lit again, glowing with that same sickly orange color I'd seen the night before. But no one was there. Uncle Henry came down, rifle in hand, face pale. He said, "They don't like to be seen, not unless you've taken what's theirs." We stood at the door, watching that light flicker near the trees. Neither of us spoke. Then Uncle Henry whispered, "It's my fault. I should have burned it all years ago." Before I could stop him, he walked into the night. I followed, couldn't let him go alone. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Each step sank into soft ground. As we neared the grove, I could hear them again,
Not whispers this time, voices. They were singing, low, drawn-out tones like a prayer or chant, the kind you can't understand but still feel deep in your bones. Uncle Henry lifted his lantern, and the light trembled across the trees. They were moving. Not swaying, moving. Branches twisting, bending down toward the soil, roots shifting under the ground, pushing upward like fingers. And those faces, the ones trapped inside the bark, their mouths were open, singing. Uncle Henry raised the rifle, but before he could pull the trigger, one of the branches shot forward, a blur of black wood, and the gun went flying from his hands. He stumbled backward, and I grabbed him before he fell. The ground between the trees began to split, a deep crack tearing through the earth. A sound came from it, a moaning like the wind trapped underground. Then I saw them, figures half-formed, crawling from the soil. Some still had bits of root wrapped around them, pulling free as they rose. They looked human, but the light showed hollow eyes and mouths that didn't move with the sound they made. Uncle Henry whispered, "It's them, the ones we took from." I didn't understand. He turned to me, voice shaking. "When your grandfather planted this orchard, he didn't just move dirt, he moved graves. They've been feeding the trees ever since." His voice broke. They wanted the fruit back, the life back, but it was too late. The ground trembled again, the trees bent inward, closing us in. The light dimmed, shadows crawling up our legs. I felt something grab my ankle, cold, hard fingers pulling down. I kicked, shouting, and Uncle Henry pulled me free. We ran. Branches lashed at our backs, roots twisting beneath our feet. The whispers were screaming now, not words anymore, just sound, 1,000 voices rising from the dirt.
We made it past the fence. Uncle Henry slammed the gate shut and dropped to his knees. The trees went still again. The singing stopped. Only the wind remained, low, hollow, whispering through the grass. I wanted to say something, but my throat burned. Uncle Henry just stared at the ground and muttered, "They won't stop now. You woke 'em." That night, he boarded up the windows and locked every door. He kept the lantern burning until morning. When I woke the next day, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Uncle Henry wasn't in his bed. His boots were gone. The rifle, too. I ran outside, calling for him. The grass was damp with dew, and there were footprints leading down the hill, straight toward the orchard. I followed them to the fence. One of the boards was broken clean in half, the nails bent outward. I climbed over, calling his name. The orchard was still. The whispering had stopped. Then I saw his hat, lying in the dirt at the center of the grove. I picked it up, and there, beneath the largest tree, I saw him. He was standing completely still, one hand pressed against the trunk. I thought he was alive until I got closer. His skin had gone pale, gray as ash. His eyes were open, but they didn't move. His mouth was slightly parted, and his fingertips were sunk deep into the wood. The bark had grown around his hand. It was pulling him in. I screamed his name, tried to grab his arm, but the tree was already closing over him, swallowing him inch by inch. And for a second, I swear I saw his lips move. He whispered one word: "Run." I did, and I didn't look back, not once. When I reached the house, I slammed the door shut and fell to the floor.
By the time the sun rose again, the orchard was silent. But Uncle Henry was gone. All that was left of him was his pipe, sitting on the porch rail, still packed with tobacco that had never been lit. I left that place the next morning, didn't even pack. I walked down the dirt road until my legs gave out, and a passing truck driver picked me up on his way to Brattleboro. He asked me if I was all right. I told him my uncle's orchard had burned down. That was easier to say than the truth. I never went back, not for years, but you can only outrun a place like that for so long.
It was nearly 20 years later when I saw Bradford Hollow again. I was driving north for work, and when I saw the exit sign, something in me turned the wheel before I even realized it. The town looked smaller, older. Most of the houses were boarded up, and the road that led to our farm had half vanished under weeds. When I reached the hill, I expected to see the orchard gone, but it was still there, overgrown, silent, but alive. The fence had collapsed long ago. The barn leaned sideways, half swallowed by vines, and the trees, God help me, they'd changed. They weren't green anymore. They were gray. The bark dry and wrinkled like old skin. No apples on the branches, not one. I walked slow between the rows, the grass high enough to brush my knees. The air smelled of damp earth and rot, thick and stale. Then I reached the western grove, the place I'd sworn I'd never set foot in again. Time hadn't touched it the same way. The ground there was bare, the trees still standing strong, and in the middle, the same one that had taken Uncle Henry. It looked larger now, its roots sprawling across the ground like veins. The trunk had grown thick and warped. The wood split in places where something beneath seemed to press outward. I stepped closer, heart pounding, half expecting to hear the whispering again. But there was only silence, a silence so deep it made my ears ring. And then I saw something near the base of the trunk. A pipe, rusty, cracked in half, packed with old tobacco. Uncle Henry's pipe. It lay half emburied in the dirt, right beside a pale shape sticking out of the roots. I knelt down. At first, I thought it was just a stone. Then I brushed away the dirt and saw fingers, thin, gray, curled tight. I stumbled back, but my foot caught on something, another root. Only it wasn't a root. It was a bone.
You've been listening to Midnight FM. That was Grandpa Joseph with The Whispering Orchard. A story about the land that remembers and the things that grow from what's buried beneath it. So, if you ever find yourself standing in a quiet orchard after dark, and the wind sounds like it's whispering your name, don't listen too closely, because the harvest may not be over. Good night, night owls, and sleep if you can.